writers just starting out, I would tell them three things. Read everything you get your hands on. You don't have to finish it, but read it differently. Read it like a writer. Why does this paragraph work? Why is this character so vivid? Why can I smell what it's like in this bakery? What did that writer do to pull that off? So read everything you get your hands on. Write every day. Treat it like a job. Show up on time, meaning if you can, same time, same place, so the muses know where to find you, and just write. It could be garbage. It could be 20 words one day, but get in that habit. Get in that habit of developing the writing muscles and developing your chops. And the third thing is find a group, find your tribe, find the peers that are on the same page as you and are taking it as seriously as you, and exchange that work. And I think the big thing that happened at Queens is I found those people. And I graduated in 2013, I think it was. And I still have that same group of, they all happen to be women, mostly Southern women by some weird happenstance. But we exchange work. We text every day, not always about writing, but we text every day. We try to meet in person once a year. So we're planning a trip up to Michigan in September to do on-site workshopping. And we're always sharing marketing tips.
Everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter, another great author on the podcast. I'm on his website while we're chatting. It's a great website. You got to go there. Stephen is here on the podcast, and he's got books out here in the world. He's a great author, and he wants to share his story with us. So we get time with him, and I'm excited to have him here. Stephen, welcome to Living the Next Chapter.
Oh, thank you for having me. Glad to be here today.
Excellent. Let everybody know, Stephen, where you are in this big world of ours.
I'm not too far from you. I'm in Buffalo, New York. I can actually see Canada from my office window. I'm right down the river.
There you go. There you go. Well, you keep an eye on us, right? We're a little rowdy over here.
I'll keep an eye on you.
Okay. All right. If things get out of hand, let me know. Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Excellent. Stephen, tell us a little bit about your author journey. How did all this start for you? What was the origin of becoming an author?
You know, if we want to go all the way back, in high school, it was either my junior or senior year, John Irving came out with The Hotel New Hampshire. And I read that. At first, it was serialized in the old Rolling Stone magazine that used to get delivered to the house when Rolling Stone was a newspaper like that big. Mm-hmm. And my sister and I used to fight over when the Rolling Stone came because we wanted to read, the latest installment from The Hotel New Hampshire. And for Christmas that year, my sister, I guess she got tired of sharing the magazine with me. She bought me the book for Christmas. And when I finished reading it, I thought, man, if I could do anything, I'd like to write like this guy. And I really didn't do too much with it. When you're in high school, I was reading a lot, not doing a whole lot of writing. But when I got to the University of Buffalo, I took my first creative writing class. I guess I was a sophomore at that time. This is probably 1982, 83. And I was hooked. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to write. I want to write novels. And this is what I want to really focus in on. Went to grad school mid-'80s, and this is about the time when Jay McInerney and Brett Lott and Bret Easton Ellis, all these American novelists who were a little bit older than me, not much. They were all under 30 or around 30, and I was, 25, 26, and they all had their first novels coming out at this time. Bright Lights, Big City, Less Than Zero, all those books came out about the same time. And I thought, well, that'll be me. By the time I'm around 28, 29, I'll have my first novel. I'll get a teaching gig and everything will be great. 30 came and went, and then 40 came and went, mm-hmm. and then 50 came and went, and I still didn't have a published book. So I thought, well, maybe this isn't a great idea. So I went back to grad school. I got my MFA from Queen's University of Charlotte, and for some reason, everything clicked there. I don't know if I finally got it or if I was just surrounded by all these creative people. But something definitely, the switch was flipped when I was down at Queens, and my master's thesis became my first book, was a collection of short stories called Muscle Cars. And my first novel came out last year. 2022. Yesteryear came out in 2023, and my next novel's coming out in 2025. So I didn't quite hit the 30-year anniversary, the birth anniversary, and getting a book published, but I'm trying to make up time now on the back end.
There you go. Okay. So for new readers that are going to come and fall in love with you as an author, what is kind of your big hope for a new reader in your community? How would you like to connect with them as they listen to the podcast?
Oh, well, I always tell people, and you mentioned my website, I always tell people the most important page on that website is the last one. That's the contact page. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, to ask questions, to drop me a note, I'm happy to go to book clubs, either in person or Zoom. Just reach out through the webpage, and I always check it, and I always respond. I love hearing from readers.
It's great. And when we chatted originally, we had a quick talk together, and you started talking about some of the history of Buffalo and some of the characters and stories that were created in Buffalo that I had no concept of, that was the origin place for these amazing stories. Let's go there, because I love history, and you've got some interesting things to talk about.
Yeah, it was probably when I finished Muscle Cars, that short story collection, and I was looking back at it after there was some distance from writing it, and I realized that the stories were really Buffalo stories. Even in those stories that I didn't name the city, there were places or people or events that kind of springboarded me into that story, and I said, "Oh, that's kind of interesting." And then I was trying to get an idea for a novel. I was reading the Sunday paper one day, the local paper here, the Buffalo News, and there was an article, and the title was something like Buffalo bank robber turns writer. And I go, what's this all about? And it was an article about a man named L. Nussbaum, who grew up here in the late 50s and got married in the early 60s and had a child, was an entrepreneur. He would tell his wife occasionally that he was going out of town for business. And Al's business was robbing banks. This is a true story. And so he robbed about 6 of them before his wife or the FBI knew who he was and what he was doing. And then he had to go on the run. And so I wrote that novel, and it alternated chapters between Al's point of view, on the run, on the road, and Lolly, his wife he left behind here in Buffalo. And again, no intention of writing a Buffalo story. I was just grabbed by this idea about this character. And I thought, that's a Buffalo story too. It's 2 books. Maybe there's something here. And so I started thinking about the books I love and the writers I love growing up. And William Kennedy, was at the top of the list. And I think at that point I decided I want to do for Buffalo what Kennedy did for Albany, New York, especially with the Albany trilogy, Legs, Billy Phelan's Greatest Game, and Ironweed, which won the Pulitzer and was a movie with Jack Nicholson. I said, I think Buffalo's going to be the literary turf that I want to explore. And then quite by, again, not planned, quite by happenstance, I'm at a party or a bar, and in conversation, somehow it came up that the writer from the Lone Ranger, the creator of the Lone Ranger, was from Buffalo. And I said, that's not true. I lived here most of my life. I mean, Buffalo's very good about promoting everybody that has any connection with the city. Mark Twain lived here for 2 years, and he's a Buffalonian. He's a Buffalo writer. So I said, this can't be right. And so I Googled it, and not only was he a Buffalo guy, he lived in my neighborhood, 90 years ago, but he grew up, in my neighborhood. He went to high school 2 blocks from where I was living at the time. He wrote The Lone Ranger on Granger Place, just up Elmwood Avenue from me. And I said, well, how can I not know about this man? And so I did more research, and I found out the reason we don't know about him as well as we should is because he sold the rights to the Lone Ranger for $10 before the Lone Ranger just exploded into this 9-decade-old money-making machine, radio and TV and movies and books. And Fran kind of missed out on that. So when I learned all that, I thought, well, this is a Buffalo story. This is what I was looking for. I want to sink my teeth in it. It's a truly a historical novel. So I brought in characters that lived in Buffalo during that period.
Mm.
So folks like Stefano Magaddino, who ran the mob in Western New York for decades, was a contemporary of Fran Stryker's. I doubt they ever met, but in my novel they do.
Mm.
Same thing with Jimmy Slattery, the world light heavyweight champion who came out of South Buffalo. He was around and during that era. Again, don't know if he and Fran ever crossed paths in reality, but the Buffalo, New York that I created in my novel Yesteryear, he's certainly a friend of Stryker and plays a big role in that novel.
Mm.
So I've kind of slowly eased into this whole idea of being not only a writer based in Buffalo, but a writer that's really enjoying, at least at this part of my career, exploring the city and the true life characters that used to live here.
Has your writing and you as a proponent for all of the things that are happening in Buffalo, has that caught the eye or the ear of anyone in Buffalo area that are like movers or shakers or historians that you get to reach out to and connect with as well because you're a writer?
I don't know about movers and shakers, but yeah, I'm getting some traction,
Okay.
doing a lot of local radio, some local TV, some the Buffalo News featured me. I think it was in the June issue of Buffalo Magazine. So yeah, it's starting to get a lot of attention, which is good. And I'm hoping to build on this with the next novel that comes out in May of 2025 called After Pearl, which is again set here in the city. And it deals with a private eye after World War II, who's a hotel detective at the Hotel Lafayette, which is still in existence and still in operation, and the trouble he gets into.
The one thing I find interesting when I talk to authors who write or go to the place where they write, so if they write something about Scotland, they jump on a plane and they go to Scotland. They want to be in the environment, and it helps them shape their writing, and they feel like they're more... Their words have more meaning because they're there and they're feeling the temperature on their skin, and they can bring in that into their writing instead of writing from your spare room of your house and imagining what it's like to be in Scotland. They go there. You live in your community, so you represent your community very well. Is that an advantage for you as an author?
Yeah, but I would like to go to Scotland.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely is. And so I write like the Hotel Lafayette, for example. Yeah. I've gone there many times and just sat in the lobby, sat at the bar, just daydream, taking in the physical description, because things like the brass mail chute in the lobby, that hasn't changed in 100 years. The bronze elevator doors, they're still there from 100 years ago. So I can go to those places and imagine the scenes that's percolating up here, or a scene that I'm stuck on, and just take in the vibe and the atmosphere, just like you said, and try to retain that and then transfer it to the page. And it's a great deal of fun, to do stuff like that and go places. I dragged my daughter out to Niagara Falls, where Magaddino, the mobster who's in Yesteryear, he had funeral parlors. He used to be a mortician, and the house where the mortuary is still there in Niagara Falls. So I dragged my daughter on the pretext that we were going out for dinner. We just had to make one stop. The stop was in Niagara Falls to go by and just look at the exterior of the building and just sit out in front and try to get a visual and take a picture. And I did that with Rook, with going by the old houses and apartments where the characters lived in that novel. And that just helps really help me to give that authenticity in the prose that I hope comes across.
Yeah, because you're going to have people from Buffalo reading your books, and they may have family knowledge or connection knowledge to the people you're writing about, going, Well, that's
Yeah,
close,
and it's
Steve, but I know a
well,
little more,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
a couple funny stories. One, in yesteryear, the book about Fran Stryker and the creation of the Lone Ranger, a lot of it is set in Forest Lawn Cemetery, which is a beautiful old cemetery right here in the city. And when you first go in the gates off of Delaware Avenue, there's a statue of Chief Red Jacket from the Seneca Nation. And in front of his monument, there's headstones from other Native Americans who were in the Civil War as runners and scouts. And I listed their names, and I also listed as one of the names on the headstone as Kimosabe, which of course is what Tano called the Lone Ranger, and and the series and the radio and movies. And I was at a book club, and one of the guys said, I took a ride up to Forest Lawn, and there is no headstone with Kimosabe on it in front of Red Jacket's statue. And I go, yes, it's a novel. It's not nonfiction. It's not a biography, but I was pleased that you went and checked. So people do that. They go and they do fact check me. Another funny story is in Rook, my first novel about the bank robber. Al Nussbaum's daughter is just an infant in that novel. And she's about a year or two older than I am. And after one of my local interviews, she reached out to me. She lives in Syracuse, about 2 hours away from me. And we exchanged emails. And she said, hey, the next time you're in Syracuse, I'd like to have a cup of coffee. I said, I would love that. The book had already been out, but we met for a cup of coffee. And we're talking, and she goes, you got something wrong in the first chapter. And I go, here we go. I go, what did I get wrong? She goes, well, when they're robbing the Brooklyn Bank, which is where it all went south after that, because they killed the guard. And I said, yeah. And she goes, well, you had them putting the money in an army duffel bag. And I said, yeah, your dad was in the army, so I just kind of figured, just no. Dad preferred American touristers. That was his suitcase of choice for putting the stolen loot in.
There you go.
So I thought that was great, and I wish I knew that detail before, but it makes for a funny story now after publication.
See, that's a good story. I like that. That's great. For you as an author with multiple books out now, I'm sure there was advice you would have really benefited from early on as an author in your early days of writing your first and getting that out to the world. So if we could flip around now and you jump into the future and talk back to the person that you were, what kind of things would have been helpful for you as a young author to help you in your journey?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and I think that's why going back for my MFA was so important to me. Not that you have to do an MFA, but what was missing in my life was a writer support group where you can exchange manuscripts and respond to them honestly and creatively and with care and love. That was always missing for me. Those, I call them the dark years, the dry years when I was just getting rejection after rejection for 30 years, basically. I tried to get into local groups, but everyone didn't really seem to have the didn't take it as seriously as I did or have the same sense of urgency. They were more interested in the food and the wine at our writer group meetings, which I certainly enjoyed. But they would say things like, yeah, I just read your story on the bus ride over here. And well, how deep of a critique are you going to be able to give me? Or she goes, I just wrote this, at lunch today. So what do you think of this? And I was like, well, it looks like you wrote it at lunch today. They didn't have that same kind of dedication. So I got frustrated. And instead of looking for that support group and just to be surrounded by creative folks, I wrote in isolation. And I think that was a major contributor for why it took me so long to get published. And if I was to advise writers just starting out, I would tell them three things: read everything you get your hands on. Mm-hmm. You don't have to finish it, but read it differently. Read it like a writer. Why does this paragraph work? Why is this character so vivid? Why can I smell what it's like in this bakery? What did that writer do to pull that off? So read everything you get your hands on. Write every day. Treat it like a job. show up on time, meaning if you can, same time, same place, so the muses know where to find you, and just write. It could be garbage. It could be 20 words one day, but get in that habit. Get in that habit of developing the writing muscles and developing your chops. And the third thing is find a group, find your tribe, find the peers that are on the same page as you and are taking it as seriously as you, and exchange that work. And I think the big thing that happened at Queens is I found those people. And I graduated in 2013, I think it was. And I still have that same group of, they all happen to be women, mostly Southern women by some weird happenstance. But we exchange work. We text every day, not always about writing, but we text every day. We try to meet in person once a year. So we're planning a trip up to Michigan in September to do on-site workshopping. And we're always sharing marketing tips. If someone sees a good webinar or listens to a good podcast, we're always sharing that kind of information. We blurb each other's work. And that's just been just a huge part of my writing life. And I'm very thankful and fortunate to have finally found it. And I don't take those women for granted at all.
Yeah. It's nice when you can have community as an author. A lot of it is solo done, plugging away on your own. And anytime you can interact with someone who knows what it feels like to do what you do is a good connection. Right?
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
We share victories. We share defeats. We pick each other up. We pat each other on the back. We celebrate. We commiserate. Complain about our children. Complain about our significant others. It's been a great relationship.
There you go. That's good. For you then, Steve, as you write, the balance between fact and fiction, like you talked about, the duffel bag, right? Like
right.
How strict are you on that? Are you pretty loose on that? What's really important to you if you had to make a decision between fact or fiction for your writing?
Yeah, and it's funny. You work on it for so long, you revise it so much. After a while, it blends, and I can't tell the difference. And people will ask me, at the Q&A session, did that really happen? And I have to stop and think sometimes. Like, well, it happened to the novel. So I try to be strict. I'm really good at doing research. Did a lot of research for yesteryear. In fact, in the back of the book is a listing of all the resources I referenced or touched on or used. A lot of references, research rather, early days of radio, for instance, research on the Depression, in addition to the Lone Ranger and Fran Stryker and all the characters, the people involved in the creation and production of that radio show. So it's really important to me to get it right. But December 7th has to be December 7th, right? The Pearl Harbor cannot be attacked on the 6th. Right. It cannot be attacked on the 8th. Yeah. It's got to be on the 7th, right? Yeah. So that's my guidelines. But the other rule of thumb is, because I'm kind of talking out both sides of my mouth here, the other rule of thumb is, it's not a biography. It's not a nonfiction piece. If it fits, it's true in the context that I am working in. And I think that's the big thing for readers who are new to historical fiction. Sometimes have a hard time getting their heads wrapped around. I remember when someone asked me what I was working on, and I explained, I'm writing about, the person who created the Lone Ranger, and I've got, Stephen Magadino in it, and I got Jimmy Slattery, and all these people that, Roosevelt shows up, and they go, well, how is that a novel? I mean, if that really happened. And then they read the book after it came out, and there's a lot in there that is, pure imagination and fantasy and magical realism. And they go, oh, now I get it. Now I see. You use that as the basis. You use that as the guardrails. But I'm weaving all over the road in between those guardrails, like a drunken sailor behind the wheel. But that's it. I try to use the facts, the truth as my guidelines to keep me centered. But in between those guardrails, it's anything goes as far as I go to make the story work.
Yeah, and you talked about bringing in other characters that were around at that same time. whether or not
Yeah.
they actually interacted with each other. At least they were from that same time period, not from a different time period completely, and like somebody from
Kind of like, the novel
2024. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like Ragtime, the novel that came out that was so popular in a movie. Same basic concept. Take a real life person, and again, it's done a lot. Just think. I referenced William Kennedy earlier. You think of Legs, about the gangster Legs Diamond, and here are these real gangsters in Legs' gang, but there's other fictional characters that Kennedy wove in there. And they fit in seamlessly in Kennedy's work. So that was really what I was trying to shoot for in yesteryear.
Okay. All right. How are you seeing writing change over the years? We have AI tools now, and we have all these different things that help authors write and sometimes write for the author. How are you seeing the world of writing change over the years?
Well, AI is a different animal, isn't it?
Right.
And it was interesting. One of my friends submitted a short story when AI, a year or so when it was first released, was all over the media, and they submitted a short story to a literary magazine, and they had to sign an affidavit saying that this was not AI generated.
Yeah.
So it is getting to that point. AI as a tool to do some fact checking for a historical novelist. It's really made life easier for me.
Yeah.
And it will, and there's just stuff that, I don't know. And unfortunately, I don't have my parents around to ask anymore. But, what did a pack of cigarettes cost in 1942? Where do you find that information? And then you ask, AI, and then it'll give you the answer and then list its resources at the end. So you can double check it. So from a research tool, it's been very helpful to me. Yeah. I think the biggest thing, the writing really hasn't changed. I think what's really changed is publishing. Not only how things are getting published, but also the quantity of what's getting published, either through traditional publishing, like I'm traditionally published, or hybrid, where the writer shares the cost, or a self-published model. And that has just put a lot more competition on the shelves, which is sometimes a good thing, right? But it's also more competition on the shelf. So that's really changed. The strong emphasis on which pigeonhole does it fit in? And this was a problem I had with yesteryear. Is it noir? Is it historical fiction? Is it magical realism? Is it a comic novel? Well, it's elements of all of those, which makes it fun to write and I hope fun to read. But I had one agent say, I really love this, but I don't know how to sell it because it didn't fit nicely into a genre where they could market it and know where to take it. My day job is in sales. And we always say, salespeople always take the path of least resistance. So I've got one book that's difficult to sell, and I'm not particularly head over heels in love with it. And another book that's really easy to sell. I'm going to take the easy one 9 times out of 10, unless I'm blown away by the one that's more work. I think that transfers into the publishing world as well. But that's where indie publishers really come in, because indie publishers, are willing to take risks, are willing to publish things that don't fit nicely into a category, or things that just have to strike them as this is wonderful writing that needs to be out in the world. So we're gonna publish you. So indie writers really fit that void, I think.
So for a new reader coming into your world, Steve, they haven't bought any of your books yet. What's your starting point? Where would you send them as their first purchase out of your library?
That's a tough one. It's like, which of your 3 children do you like best? Which is your favorite? That's right. That's right. Well, I think, going back to that first book, Muscle Cars, which came out in 2015, those are short stories. I describe it as 17 short stories about guys making bad decisions, which is semi-autobiographical. But within those stories, looking back, I think you see all the elements that I've been working and developing in the novels. So the sense of place of Buffalo, New York, are there. The importance of family, the pressure, financial pressures, and economic factors, the grittiness of urban life. All those elements are in the short stories, and they're just magnified in the novel. So if anyone was looking for a sampler to see, if they should, want to invest the money or time in the novels, I guess I would start with Muscle Cars.
Okay.
That would be a good starting point, I think.
Okay. And as you continue to write, is this something you're just going to sign in for the long term? Like this is where you're heading in life, that you're going to keep writing as an author?
Well, at least I can imagine for the next 3 novels that I have in my head.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes. I would say for the next, say, decade. I think I'll still be exploring this turf. What happens after that, I'm not limiting myself. I could decide that I want to write something, a contemporary novel set in Scotland, so I can take that trip. I may do that. Who knows? But at least for the foreseeable future, I'll still be kind of working this territory, working this turf.
Excellent. What does it mean to you to know that, like, Lone Ranger has its origin in Buffalo? Like, growing up, having all the toys and the swag and the merch and watching it on TV or hearing the radio shows back in the day.
Yeah.
How inspiring is that for you to know that something so iconic came from your community?
It was shocking. Yeah. And, because not only did he write The Lone Rangers, Fran Stryker also wrote The Green Hornet, created The Green Hornet, and Sergeant Preston of the Yukon. Who wasn't as successful, but just the Lone Ranger and the Green Hornet had huge impact on 20th century pop culture. And this, the Lone Ranger premiered in Buffalo on WEBR in a pilot in January of 1933. So he was one of the first really big radio mega hits. He preceded Superman. He preceded Batman. He was the one of the first. And when people ask me here locally, what are you working on, or what's Yesteryear about? I say it's about Fran Stryker. He's from Buffalo, and he wrote The Lone Ranger. And they go, I didn't know that. And it's gotten forgotten over the years. So it's really has meant a lot to me to get Stryker's name back in the conversation. And here on Washington Street, that runs right in front of the public library, the Central Library, and Just Buffalo Literary Center, they called it Lit City, and they have banners of all the writers from Western New York. And again, Mark Twain's up there because he spent 2 years here. Yeah. So when they first put those banners up, I took a walk down Washington Street, and I was looking for Fran. I was right in the middle of writing Yesteryear when they put those banners up. And there wasn't one. So I immediately went back and dashed off an email and listed all the reasons why Stryker should be up there. Never heard back. I think I had an email saying, it's forwarded on to the committee. And when they put the second wave of the banners up, I took a walk down again, and Fran Stryker does have his own banner. I don't know if I had anything to do with that, but I will take partial credit.
Writing, yeah, you have that. You have that, Nina, so you can do that.
Yeah. And it's right in front of the Brisbane building, okay, which Fran Stryker worked in the Brisbane building at Woolworths, FW Woolworths, before he went into radio and became a writer. Wow. I'm sure that was just, lucky coincidence. But I thought it was kind of cool, and the stars aligned on that one. And the Brisbane building and Stryker's banner is right across the street from the Hotel Lafayette, which is the setting for my Private Eye series that starts next May, called After Pearl. And I'm working on the second book in that trilogy. So that little corner there is kind of my little old magic corner, I think, because good things happen there.
So can you pass me that email address so I can send them an email to get you a banner on that street? I think you should be up there too, Steve.
There you go. Maybe someday. That'd be pretty cool to for my kids to see.
Yeah. Well, you're on the right path, right? Doing this and
I hope
sharing
so.
the stories of Buffalo. It's excellent. I like that. So as far as the website, Stephen, everything, all things about you and your books and everything for people that want to reach out to you and connect with you, I do want to kind of end off with a question for you as we sum up, but take us to the website. It's beautiful, by the way. I love the cover of Muscle Cars. That's a great picture, by the way. Take us through and kind of walk us through the website a little bit as we're kind of wrapping up.
Yeah, and just a quick aside, that Muscle Cars cover, we they really didn't come up with a Santa Fe Writers Project really didn't come up with a cover that I was really thrilled about, and that's what's great with working with an indie press. They'll take your views into consideration. You don't have the final say, but they'll listen to you. And I said, "What kind of car do you want?" And I saw something beat up, something rusty. I mean, the muscle cars in those books, they're all beaters like we used to drive when I was a kid. And we found that picture at a junkyard in Alabama. And so that made it up on the cover. But the website, I put a lot of work into that website. And it'll probably be up refreshed later this year once we get the cover art. Well, the cover art's done for After Pearl, but once we start marketing that and putting it up. But if you go to my website, you'll see the events page. And I'm already booking events into 2025. You'll see bios, my bios, a long version, a short version, press releases, trailers for the books. You can certainly order the books through my website. The news will keep you up to date with what I've been up to in terms of appearances and readings and lectures. And with those news, if you click on them, those are all links, and those will take you to interviews or links to podcasts that I've done
Excellent.
In the past. So that's interactive. And then, like I said, the contact page is the most important one. That's where readers can get in touch with me.
Excellent. That's great, Steve. I love this. This is awesome. Again, for those who have not been to Buffalo, beyond the wings, which is obviously you got to have the wings, where would you send somebody to come visit your fair city? Have they land into Buffalo? I love your airport, by the way. The best airport in the world. It's so easy to get in and out of there. I was a limo driver for so long. I used to drive limo to Buffalo Airport from Niagara all the time. But for somebody landing in Buffalo, they're going to stay over or something on their trip. They're going to go see the sights. Where would you send someone in your fair city?
I would look into some of the architectural tours because we still have a lot of the buildings that went up in the 19th century, and a lot of them have been restored and preserved. So I would definitely take a tour of that, and it's a great place to if you're into architecture. We have a few Frank Lloyd Wright of his works here. Check that out for sure. Forest Lawn cemeteries. If you love wandering through cemeteries, that's a great place. Everyone from Rick James to Millard Fillmore is buried in there. It was the place to be buried if you were anybody in Buffalo during Buffalo's golden years of the 18th and early 19th and early 20th century. So I would do that. You certainly want to go to Niagara Falls, although the Canadian side has the better view. You certainly want to do that. And then, of course, the waterfront. We actually have a movie studio that was just built and opened this past spring right here on Niagara Street. And in one of the interviews, they asked, well, why are you building a movie studio in Buffalo? And they go, well, it's cheaper than filming in Toronto. It's cheaper than filming in New York. You've got all these old buildings. You have access to Lake Erie. You have access to the Niagara River. You're in driving distance to Niagara Falls. You have quaint little towns like Ellicottville, New York. That's also a short drive. We can film TV movies and low to medium-sized budget movies right here. And so that just opened up, and that kind of gives you a flavor for, the Western New York area, because you can come here and visit the water and Niagara Falls and the great architecture, and then drive a little bit and see these charming little towns. So it's a great place to hang out. And I always say we have cold beer at reasonable prices. So it's a good place to visit.
And the best people in New York State all gathered in one place called Buffalo. That's what we'll say, right?
That's right. That's right.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Steve, thank you so much for doing this, taking time to share your journey as an author.
You.
And I'm looking forward to watching your journey continue and more great books in the future.
Oh, thank you. I had a lot of fun today.
Excellent. All the information, everyone, for Steve and his website, all included in the show notes when you buy Steve's books, because I know you're going to. And you're going to share these with others and have them buy the books. Leave a great review as well. That's a great thing for our authors. That'll help more people find and fall in love with everything that Steven's doing as an author. I would really encourage you to leave that detailed review every time you support our authors. Go and let him know that you heard him on the podcast as well. That's it's always a good thing for him to know that all this time he's investing in us by being on the show has brought back some return for him as a guest. So, Stephen, again, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to Living the Next Chapter. I'm glad you stayed all the way to the end. You're my new bestie. And the one thing I like to do with my besties is enjoy time together over a cup of coffee. Now, one thing missing in the equation is my coffee cup is empty. And what I would love if, after 390 plus episodes roughly, if you found any value in the podcast and you want to say, hey, Dave, do you need a refill of your coffee cup? I'm looking at it right now, and you know what? It's looking kind of sad. There's not much in the coffee cup. If you want to help support the podcast, I would love you forever as besties and celebrate coffee with you. You can celebrate and support the show at our website using our Buy Me a Coffee link. And all the money goes back into the podcast. And we also like to give it to other podcasters. So if you want to support the show, head over to livingthenextchapter.com and let's top it up. Thank you guys. Thanks for listening. Cheers.